Welcome back to Verge 365. He's John McMullen. I'm your guy, Tony Deshields II filling in for Jody MaC. And we're joined by the legendary voice of the Eagles in Espanol, Rickie Ricardo, covering the New York Yankees and the Philadelphia Eagles. Rickie, how are you feeling, sir?
Morning, Tone. JMac, how are you? How is everybody?
Rickie. Yeah, good to see you, bud. It's getting some of that Aaron Judge money up there with the New York Yankees. Now that is big time. That's why I love.
Aaron's gonna get close to my salary.
Yeah, I figured he'd get about 3/4 was my guess. Pre-deal. Good to see you though, Rickie. Wanted to talk. Tone and I were discussing momentum going into the playoffs. Obviously, the Eagles weren't playing their best football. I think that's fair to say at the end of the season. A lot of context to that, starting with Jalen Hurts. So that's where I want to start. And is the momentum a bigger concern for you or the health of the quarterback? Because here's Nick Sirianni again on Tuesday saying, oh, we knew he was going to be hurting like hell, and Jalen knew he was going to be hurting like hell. What the heck is going on with this injury? When it first happened, they were like, oh, he might be back for Dallas 6 days later. Now he's hurting like hell over 3 weeks later.
I think to a certain extent, somebody might be trying to pull our leg a little bit, because if this guy is as hurt as they make it seem to be, and those very comments you just mentioned, then we're coming right out of the gate with, 8 straight pass plays at the beginning of the game? You would think if your MVP quarterback is in that much discomfort that you would rely heavily on your running game, or you'd figure out some other way other than using the quote-unquote very painful right arm and shoulder of Jalen Hurts. So I don't know how much of this is gamesmanship and how much of it is fact. As far as momentum is concerned, in baseball they say momentum is as good as your next day's starting.
Yeah, I said that. Yeah. Rickie, way to go, bud.
So as far as this particular situation with a week off, I think all bets are off. I think you scrub everything with this bye week. This is huge to have this bye week here for the Eagles to kind of have a complete reset. I think this team will come out. It'll look a lot more, guys, in my opinion. It'll look a lot more like the undefeated team. And a lot of this is not even just on Jalen Hurts, but on Lane Johnson, who to me is just you can't understate the impact of not having him on that right side of the offensive line. But I do believe, and my gut is telling me, that when they do hit the field, and I believe, and I don't know if we're going to get into this or not, but I think it'll be against the Giants, and it'll probably be on Saturday night, because I'm picking Tampa Bay to win, and I'm picking the Giants to beat Minnesota. So I think on Saturday night at Lincoln Financial Field, which I guess would be the 21st, I think it's Eagles-Giants, and I think Jalen Hurts will be just fine, and you're going to see a tremendous turnpike tussle battle round 3 between those two division opponents. Just a wild guess of mine, obviously speculative, but I think that's the direction we're going in.
Hey, Rickie, we're definitely going to get into that, and I would definitely have to agree with you about those Giants. But, you brought up Lane Johnson, and protecting Jalen Hurts, especially at this time in the season, is going to be paramount to their success in the grand scheme of things. And Lane Johnson is important. I never want to pretend like his role in this team is minimized or doesn't matter. He is vital. He's vital. He's a vital cog. He's vital to this team's success. But, since he's going down, to me at least, it seems like the rest of this offensive line is being slept on. I'm not saying Jack Driscoll was on his level. I'm not saying Andre Dillard is on his level. But you still have an all-pro center, Jason Kelce. You still have a Pro Bowler in Landon Dickerson. You have 2 Pro Bowl alternates in Jordan Mailata and Isaac Seumalo. So, I'm asking you, right? Do you think that the rest of this offensive line is being overlooked without Lane Johnson?
He's just, Tony's. He's a real pillar of that line. He balances things out. What I saw in the couple of games without Lane, as compared to, let's say, the first 11, 12 weeks before guys start really getting nicked up, is pressure is getting to Jalen Hurts a little bit quicker. The decision that Jalen has to make between I'm going to get rid of the football or I'm going to run. That decision-making process has been accelerated from that side of the line. You can, when you're in my booth and you're obviously watching, it's almost like a human all 22 that I've got when I'm calling the game, as John from the press box. But you can watch some of that pressure come in from that side just a little bit quicker than it does when Lane is there. And that decision-making process is accelerated. And look, Jalen, up until now, I think has been able to handle it. But you saw some of the turnovers. Remember, this team hardly ever turned the football over early in the year. You started to see more penalties later in the year here these last few games. You've seen some more turnovers. They've looked much more quote-unquote human than they did. It was a football machine, early in the season. You're seeing some of the more mistake-prone moments happen since Lane has been out. So you had to use a tight end on that side to help out Driscoll a little bit more, which takes away, I think, from Dallas Goedert's use as a receiver. So having Lane, I think, is a two-tier return. I think you can leave him on an island on that side. Goddard is much more effective now as a receiver, as a receiving tight end. You don't have to use Stoll and everyone else for help on that side. It just helps the offense in several ways. A domino effect having Lane out. Not saying that the rest of the line doesn't deserve all the credit, as you mentioned, Tone. This is one of the best, if not the best, offensive line in the entire National Football League. But I tell you what, that's a key pillar on that side of the line when you've got Lane out.
Just a quick follow-up, John. Sorry, John. I don't mean to interrupt. Just a quick follow-up. So if you're the man in charge, Ricky, I think we all know how the team is going to handle the offensive line. They might have Drake just go out there in the event that Lane can't go. He says he's going to try to push it. But in the event that he can't go, how would you construct this offensive line?
The idea of using Dillard and Mailata on either side instead of Driscoll, I've heard that idea come up. I don't know if you want to go that draft. I mean, if Lane can't go, I guess you do have to I would go to Driscoll. Several people have asked me about the other concept, and I'll ask you guys. Mailata and Dillard, one on each side. Where do you put, either guy? But like I said, when you're using Driscoll, the tight end becomes more of a blocking position than a receiving position, at least on, I don't know what percentage more plays, but the offense is not as diverse or as creative as it is when Dallas Goedert is attacking the linebackers. So personally, your question, if I were the guy and I'm making that call, after much consideration, I'd probably still go Driscoll with some help on that side. Although the concept of having Dillard and Mailata on either side of the line has been brought up to me.
Yeah, I think, Ricky, that had to do with the fact that they always expected Lane back for the playoffs, and Lane's going to try to play through this. So, in other words, if Lane was deemed out for the season and he had surgery, I think it would have been a more serious conversation. All right, we got to get our best five on the field. We got to move Jordan to the right side because he doesn't care. Jordan doesn't care. He'll do it.
He doesn't care.
Andre Dillard is very uncomfortable on the right side, so he would have to play left tackle. I think if Lane was out, and we knew done for the season, I think that would have been a more serious conversation. But the Eagles knew it was a stopgap. It was about getting through 2 games. And I think you're right about, but there's not much to criticize about this coaching staff. They've done a tremendous, tremendous job. We know Shane Steichen's going to interview for 3 head coaching jobs over the weekend. Jonathan Gannon may be the front runner in Houston. Great job by this coaching staff. One little nitpick I would have, and you were talking about you need to help Jack Driscoll on the right side. I don't think they help him enough. I think they're used to leaving Lane and Jordan on an island, and that helps. That is such a luxury because it enables you to do so many things on offense. Same thing defensively when we saw with Devonta Maddox, him being out of the lineup at times. They tell Josiah Scott, hey, we're going to play this quirky Tampa 2 invert defense. Make sure you hit your landmark. You got to make it a little bit more comfortable. If that's Avonte Maddox, fine. We saw it with Reed Blankenship and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Reed's done a tremendous job as an undrafted rookie, but you can't expect him to do what C.J. does.
No.
I think too often they believe the hype on this next man up mentality, and they say, all right, next guy up, do what this guy does. And that's not realistic to me. Am I being too nitpickish, Rickie Ricardo?
No, I don't think you are. Look, the depth on this team has been tested. It's done a heck of a job. I'm the first one that'll sit here and tell you, when I saw Blankenship, for that torpedo attitude of his is refreshing, but it's dangerous. But I tell you what, Howie Roseman, who I believe this morning, did I read somewhere where Howie Roseman, or maybe NFL Network, is really being touted as executive of the year.
Yeah.
All applause has to go, and all the credit in the world has to go to a guy like that and his staff for putting together layer after layer of guys that can take that mentality of the next man up to a certain level. But obviously, when you've got guys the talent level of a C.J. Gardner-Johnson or an Avonte Maddox, there's only so much you can do. That's why these guys are backups. Let's be frank about it. Having said that, they've done an incredible job, but really the level that they need to reach to be able to have that luxury, as you mentioned, John, is something that it's a tightrope that you walk each and every time that you put those guys out there.
Yeah, speaking of guys like Reed Blankenship and Josiah Scott, Rickie, it makes me think about, where those guys would normally be, right? Being undrafted, being lowly drafted, right? Those guys would typically be on the special teams. And, we talked about momentum, and the Philadelphia Eagles special teams hasn't had the greatest of momentum earlier in the season, but it seems like they're starting to get things figured out in that regard. And, it makes me think about the 2017 team. I was watching some old film of the 2017 Super Bowl team for the Philadelphia Eagles, and outside of the offense and defense, what made that team so special, so dynamic, was their ability to make plays on special teams. So I guess my question for you is, has this version of the Philadelphia Eagles elevated their special teams in a way that you can trust them in the postseason?
In the last month, Tone, in the last 3-4 games, marked improvement. Especially, look, Boston Scott adds a dimension on kickoffs, and we've seen against the Giants. So you're talking about 2 giant games with Boston Scott being this incredible giant killer. So really, when I'm looking at Eagles special teams, I think they hit their probably all-time low sometime around Thanksgiving. But since then, in the month of December, marked improvement. I don't exactly know. Maybe, John, you can help me out here. I don't exactly know where I can put my finger on it to say exactly where I think they have elevated their game on special teams the most. I think in every aspect it's gotten better. But I agree with you, Tone. This team's special teams in every facet, right around that December. Who did we play? Tennessee? Yeah. It was Tennessee on my birthday on December 4th, and then the Giants on December 11th, especially up in the Meadowlands. I think, if memory serves me correctly, from that game on the 11th of December in New York, things have gotten markedly better, much better in every facet of special teams. And I do agree, the Super Bowl winning team, Doug Peterson's team, on special teams, I think they were one of the top in the entire league that season, not just one of the better Eagles versions of special teams that we have seen. Because I remember we were talking about the special teams coaches, being lauded, around the league at that particular time. But
they were special. The special teams were special.
They were very special. Yeah. So marked improvement in the last month, and I think that's going to be huge going into this postseason.
Yeah, one of my early criticisms of the Eagles, because special teams is about the only thing they haven't done well. I think overall through the whole season, you're right, that Tennessee game is when it kind of started to turn around a little bit, Rickie, because it was the Green Bay game before that where they had all the issues with the kick returner there, Nixon. And then they started elevating Christian Ellis, who proved to be a very good special teams player. They ultimately had to put him on the 53 because he was so good. That's what the Eagles did under Dave Bipp, and Dave got here during Chip Kelly's reign,
Right.
And then they always had the Chris Maragoses, the Brian Braymonds. They had guys who were specifically there for special teams. I think the Eagles got away from that. Even Rudy Ford was a heck of a special teams player when he was healthy. They brought him in. I think they got away from some of that, and they got back to it by putting Christian Ellis on the team. So I think that helped. I think putting Boston Scott a kick returner. Boy, if there's one thing that was so obvious, Quez Watkins is not a good kick returner. We've seen it for 2 years.
Yeah, right.
We've seen it for 2 years. Britton Covey, nicest kid in the world, just doesn't have the long speed to be a kickoff returner. And you got Boston Scott. Now he's not going to be Cordero Patterson, but he's rock solid, and he's going to get you what you should get on a particular kickoff return. But I'll still say, Ricky, still concerns me special teams. Aaron Cepas is out. Wasn't that great to begin with. Now you have Brett Kern, who hasn't exactly knocked it out of the park as a punter. Jake Elliott's been solid, but I think there are 13 categories, Pro Football Focus grades. The Eagles are top half of the league in 12. The only thing they're bottom half in the league in is special teams, and I think they're number 30. So they're way down at the bottom. So that is my one concern about this team going into the playoffs.
Well, I think they were that bad early in the year. And as you said, I think things bottomed out that night against Green Bay. We've seen the marked improvement. Is it enough to get them out of the, that number 30 hole? And I think that ranking is well deserved, John. I'm not even arguing with that ranking. I'm agreeing. But I'm saying, I agree, early in the season, until they got a couple of things straightened out, it was pathetic. It was one of the worst, if not the worst, in the league. So I think what they have returned to or have improved to is a level of competent special teams, but the word special still does not describe this particular group.
Yeah, I at this point, I will call them average teams, right?
Yeah,
definitely. It makes me think about Green Bay last year. They were a team that was the number 1 seed. They had the best quarterback. They had Devonta Adams still. They were firing on all cylinders, but then they ran up against the San Francisco 49ers at Lambeau in the snowstorm. And that's the kind of game where offense is not going to have their best day. You're going to have to play 60 minutes of football. You're going to need everyone to do their job to the best of their ability. And it just seemed, it didn't seem. It was the fact that the special teams laid an egg. They lost that game strictly because of special teams. And one of my fears, and I know John has brought this up earlier in the season, one of my fears with this team is that, they'll check every box offensively and defensively, but they may drop the ball on special teams. They may give up a score or give up bad field position on a potential game-winning drive for whatever quarterback they're going up against, right? So, I mean, does the special teams concern you enough to the point where it can be a liability in the playoffs, or are you in a more comfortable position now?
Interesting you brought up that San Francisco-Green Bay game. In this particular round, Tone, they're going to get – my heart tells me the Niners are going to beat Seattle. So more than likely you're going to get the team that I think is going to be the Eagle opponent, the Giants, or Dallas. You're going to get the Giants or the winner of the Dallas-Tampa Bay game. Against either one of those 3 teams, and especially the Giants, because Boston Scott plays such a big role on Eagles special teams, and he is a giant killer.
He is.
It doesn't worry me as much as it will if and when the Eagles play an NFC championship game against those very 49ers that you mentioned, because it's still locked in my head, the block punt, everything that happened against Green Bay. The Niners special teams are special. They're still playing that way this season. So to answer, and I know it might sound like a cop-out of an answer, but against the 3 teams that could possibly be the opponent in the divisional round, I think we're okay. NFC Championship game against the Niners, maybe a little colder, a little bit deeper into the month of January, much more reminiscent of that Saturday night at Lambeau. Then my concern level will rise significantly.
I think Eagles fans should hope your scenario comes true, because I look at the 4 potential opponents, Ricky, and I grade them and I say, who would be the easiest path for the Eagles to get to the championship game? And let's be honest, they should beat all 4 of the potential teams. So you mentioned Seattle, probably not going to beat San Francisco. The Giants, a lot of people think they're going to beat Minnesota because, the Vikings are leaking oil, barely beat them last time they played them. And then you have the Bucs versus the Cowboys. But from the Eagles' perspective, I think the easiest of those 4 opponents by far, is the New York Giants. I don't see how they lose to the New York Giants. Styles make bites. We all know that. When the Eagles were playing back at MetLife, that was probably the most impressive. They destroyed the Giants. Talking to Pat Leonard from the Daily Newsday. Sorry, thank you for correcting me. And he was like, he's covered the Giants for a long time. He's never seen them admit, we got our asses kicked. We got destroyed. They were shook by just how dominant the Eagles were in that game. Boy, if the Giants come here, and you're going to hear all that talk, division rival, hard to beat a team 3 consecutive times. They're going to roll over that team. If I'm an Eagles fan, bring it on. That's who I want.
Well, the other side of that argument is that the Giants did not have their full
the JP.
You didn't have Ojulari. You didn't have, some of the corners. McDaniel is back. So Adoree Jackson is playing this week, so he's back.
Nobody played in that final game. I mean, nobody on
even
the
at
Giants
the Meadowlands. Yeah. Even the first game on the 11th.
Yeah. Adoree was out. Yeah. Xavier McKinney was out. Yeah. You're right. And they're going to try to play, but they're also banged up. So when we also talk about, and by the way, they're good players. They're not great players. Remember, when we go back to the preseason, there were 2 teams that everybody looked at in the NFC that weren't even trying, right? They were rebuild mode, complete rebuild. And this, by the way, is the reason I'm voting for Brian Daboll as coach of the year. I love you, Nick, but I'm rooting for Brian Daboll because he's done the most with the least. And I think he's done an amazing job. We all said it about Chicago, Ricky, and it turned out to be true. They weren't even trying to win. They were in full rebuild mode. That's what everybody thought about the Giants. They weren't even trying to win. They were in complete rebuild mode. And all of a sudden, Brian Daboll's got them winning games. So I give tremendous credit for the head coach, Mike Kapke as well, old friend of ours here in Philadelphia, former Eagles backup quarterback. I think that coaching staff has done a tremendous job. But I talked about those PFF rankings for the Eagles, how impressive they are. They grade the New York Giants just on the film, as the 29th best team in the NFL. Only worse is Arizona, Chicago, Houston. In other words, they don't have the talent to deal with the Philadelphia Eagles. Brian Daboll is phenomenal. He's going to bring every mirror he's got. He's going to try every trick in the book. But at the end of the day, they just don't have the horses to deal with the Eagles.
I think they leave their best effort. And I watched a little bit of the film of the Giant-Viking game from a few weeks ago. The Giants had that game in hand. And I am also one of these guys, fellas, that I have seen enough of a sample size of one Kirk Cousins to not buy into Cousins in any kind of a big game situation.
Well,
Prime
that's
time
fair.
playoffs.
But that's what, Minnesota's got some issues. But
Yeah.
the honest, if Minnesota brings their A game, and you're right, they probably won't. Oh, they'll kill the Giants. I mean, they're the ones with Justin Jefferson. They're the ones with Kirk Cousins throwing for 4,500 yards every stinking year. They're the ones with Daniil Hunter and Zadarius Smith and her. I mean, they have better players. Now, does that show up on game day? They've struggled mightily defensively. But either way, if it's the Giants or the Seahawks or the Bucks or the Cowboys, the Eagles should beat any of those teams in the divisional round. But if you said John McMullen, who's the easiest path? New York Giants.
To bounce off of John, Rickie.
I'm looking forward to that. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm picking the Giants. I think San Francisco wins, and I will be at Raymond James Stadium. Remember, it's about a 45-minute drive from where I'm sitting right now. So Monday night, I will be at Raymond James Stadium. It'll either be the game that puts that puts Tom Brady out in San Francisco, because I'm picking the Giants on Sunday, or it could be Brady's last game in a Tampa Bay Buccaneer uniform. But either way, I want to be there and watch it. But I think Tampa will beat Dallas. They've beaten them, they beat them this year on opening day in Dallas. They've got their number per se. And I do think the Eagles should beat, as you said, any one of these four. But to have a turnpike tussle, one more round.
Yeah, it's good for the rivalry standpoint.
And the rivalries. Because I'm one of those people, guys, that believes, and I've said this on my radio show on several occasions, and I've had polls up, had fans call back and forth. I think long term, the Eagles' real rival are the Giants.
Oh, I agree.
Over the Cowboys.
I agree. But they dominated. There was that great commercial, Rickie. I don't know if you remember. Alec Baldwin, Yankees fan, John Krasinski, Red Sox fan. And it was at the time before the Red Sox had turned it around, won a couple World Series. And the whole gist of the commercial was they were going back and forth, talking a little trash to each other. And Alec Baldwin said, hey, Kindling doesn't have a rivalry with fire. And that's been the Eagles and the Giants. I mean, they have dominated this rivalry since 2006. I think the Giants finally got it right with Brian Daboll. I think that it's going to become more of a rivalry again in the upcoming years. But Kindling, man, doesn't have a rivalry with fire.
No, I'll tell you what Daboll has been able to do with Daniel Jones and make him let's be honest. I think Daniel Jones had one foot out the door before this season started. Yeah. And I think now at this point the Giants are going to have to re-sign him to some sort of a long-term deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
What other option do they have with Daniel Jones, right? Speaking of this wild card weekend and preferred matchups, in the divisional round, Rickie, I have to ask you, if the Eagles are to get to the Super Bowl, like we would expect them to do, what's your preferred path? So I think we all can agree that the Giants is probably the better matchup in the divisional round. Taking it a step further from there, what's the preferred path to the Super Bowl? Well,
Tone, I think the preferred path would be somehow to get the Vikings into the NFC Championship game. I don't see it happening that way.
That'd be nice.
That'd be great.
Nice. Yeah.
I think it's going to be Brock Purdy, who could end up being, think about this, Brock Purdy could end up being the only quarterback, I believe it would be the only quarterback ever to be undefeated to get to a Super Bowl. Because Bob Greasy, although he had a perfect season, 72 Dolphins, lost a game or two the year before that. But preferred path, Minnesota. Realistically, I think it's going to end up being Niners, Eagles at the Link on a cold third, fourth weekend, whatever it may be, of the month of January. And we can have this conversation anew and a fresh conversation when that happens. Preferred, Vikings. Realistically, Niners.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But number one, number two seeds, there's a lot of upsets in the NFL, so you never know what happens. We'll leave it there. The great Rickie Ricardo, RR_Ricardo FAN. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. You can listen to him locally on WIP, up WFAN. He's everywhere. The voice of the Eagles, the voice of the Yankees, and a great guy as well.
Thank you, fellas. Appreciate it.
And enjoy Tom Brady's last game in Tampa. And don't sleep on Las Vegas, by the way. Don't sleep on Las Vegas. Don't sleep on Las Vegas for Tom next year.
No. He will be a Miami Dolphin next year.
Yeah. Stephen Ross, the Michigan man, he already tried to make that happen.
Well, I think
there's a lot of trouble. Yeah.
Remember, Brady's kids live on Star Island, in Miami. Yeah. And he's going to want to be as near his kids as possible. I think Tom Brady, if he plays one more year, I think Tua might take a year off to clear the cobwebs. Yeah. No, I'm not trying to make light of of his situation, but I just think physically, I think Tom Brady might end up being. You give him those weapons that they've got in Miami, look out.
Rickie, thank you so much, my friend. You've done great work for us. You take care. You enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we got something good to talk about in the next several weeks.
Enjoy the wild card, the super wild card weekend.
Super wild card weekend.
Talk again soon.
Thanks, Rickie.
Oh man, that was fun. I really enjoyed talking to Rickie. His perspective is always unique, and being the legendary voice of the Eagles in Espanol, you get so many different perspectives. Man, he holds it down. And, I'm grateful for that. So, John, what we're going to do here is we're going to take our next break of the show. Continue to smash that like button, you guys. We have a lot of conversation left to attack. And I have a question for John in the next segment that I think a lot of you guys in the chat section are really going to want to get involved in, that you guys are really going to want to get engaged in. So, again, he's John McMullen. I'm your guy, Tone Deshields II. Excuse me. Can't even pronounce my own name. Wow. I'm filling in for the famous Jody McDonald. We'll see you next time, guys. We'll be back in a minute.